Welcome. My name is Adam. I run Stone Security's Global Technology Center. And out of that GTC, we get to host our demos and do these trainings. Um, I have been here at the GTC now for 4 years, and it's been really fun to build and grow that over time. If you are ever in Vegas, particularly if you're in town for ISC West, which is coming up first week of April, we would love to have you come drop by, take a look. We have a shuttle bus that two of them actually that will be running between the event center where ISC is held and our Global Technology Center office here in Las Vegas, and it will run and go back and forth at the top and bottom of every hour. So every 30 minutes, a bus will be leaving and arriving here at the GTC. So if you are in town for ISC West, check that out and come by, come visit, and we'll be happy to show you any of the numerous things that we have to show, or just chat or answer questions or hang out and just have some fun. All right. Also, all of our training sessions get posted to our YouTube channel. And so if you are ever wanting to come back and review something that you saw, maybe you're trying to follow along, set up a holiday schedule or whatever it might be, and you can't quite remember that one step that we always seem to miss, checking our YouTube channel and finding that video and then reviewing that is a great resource to be able to do that. Also, we have our Stone Security webpage. And so this is a great tool to be aware of our upcoming events, any news related to Stone Security coming up. If you're ever curious, like, hey, how many branches, how many offices now does Stone have? We've got a nice map here that shows where all those are, as well as contact information there. So that's a great resource to look at as well. Today, we are going to be talking about LenelS2 NetBox. And we're going to be covering kind of some more behind the scenes elements. We're going to be talking about how we kind of keep our system more secure, but in some ways that maybe we don't typically think about. One of those we're going to talk about is all of those card holders that have just accumulated over time in your system, maybe how we can deal with cleaning some of them up. Maybe some policies that we can put in place to help take care of that moving forward into the future. And we're going to look at how we secure our system in terms of the software login component. We'll also look at backups, restoring backups, archives, and how that works. And then depending on time, we'll look at some other things towards the end. If you have any questions along the way, there is a Q&A section. Drop those into the Q&A, and we'll see if we can address them either as we go or at the end. It may take a minute or two to type some of those out as well. So if you get started on that early, then we'll have those to talk to when we get to the end. For your attendance today, we have a lunch credit that will be sent to you after the training. That will come to your email, and it will be a voucher that you can use to go towards getting yourself some kind of a tasty lunch. Whether you have that or use that today or in the next, tomorrow, I think there's a time limit on how long they're valid for. So if you get one, don't hang on to it for too long. Don't sit on to it for too long. Use it pretty quick. 48 hours. You got 48 hours once you get it. Okay. All right. Let's just dive right in now. So I am logged into my NetBox here. This should be pretty familiar to everybody on the call. And the first thing we want to look at is we'll actually tackle kind of the website access of things first. And so for those settings, we're going to go to the configuration menu. We're going to go to site settings and network controller. From here, we're going to look at some of these tabs, but we're going to go to the website tab first. The settings here that are relevant to us, there's a couple, and we'll kind of go through them one by one. One option is there is a limit session to a single IP address. Now, a session is a user logged in. So, can that user be logged in from multiple IP addresses simultaneously? Yes or no? There are some reasons you might say no to this, and there's some reasons you might say yes. If you want to allow somebody to be logged in from their laptop and also logged in from their desktop at the same time, and those are two physical different machines, they would each have their own IP address. Then you wouldn't want to say yes. You wouldn't want to turn this on because they would only be allowed one active session. They'd have to log out of one. For example, log out of the NetBox client on the laptop in order to then log in on their workstation. Or inversely, maybe you want to restrict just that single point of access. And so in that case, you can say yes and then apply those changes. Now, if you forget to log out and you just close the browser tab, then it will show you as an active session because the logout is what triggers that active session. So there is a session timeout value that you can set of 24 hours, 8 hours, 4 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour, 30 minutes. And if your session is not logged out, your session will time out at that point. This session timeout may also impact how long you can be logged in before it like auto logs you out. I haven't tested that, so it may or may not impact that. It's an easy thing to test though. Just set it to 30 minutes and let it sit open for 30 minutes and see if it kicks you out after. But I don't think it would necessarily. Thinking out loud here. Okay. The next section here that's going to be really important is passwords. What is our password complexity profile for NetBox? Do we want a minimum length? Do we want to force complex passwords with numbers, letters, and special characters? Do we want to log previous passwords and prevent their reuse? The use case there, the example there is I set a password and then I'm forced to change my password or my password expires and I have to go and rotate my password. Can I change it to password option B, variant B? And then next time, can I go back to variant A? So that prevent reuse is going to prohibit that. All right, another option here is the password expiration and then in months. So if you want to force people to rotate their passwords, and keep in mind, this is for who can log into the website. So we could say, all right, your passwords are valid for 6 months, and then you have to rotate them. Reject the prior passwords. We can say like the prior 5 passwords must be rejected. We could say you must have a minimum of 16 characters and require letters, numbers, and special characters. However you want to set that up. Whatever, and some of your organizations may have policies in place for what your password requirements should be. Now, if you are leveraging a single sign-on, for example, with Azure in Entra or on-prem AD, then you'll either want to set these to match so that those credentials being used in that system, when they're leveraged here, you won't have any conflict, or at least any credentials being used, any local users being managed by the NetBox, those passwords will be forced to match what is being required at that SSO level as well. Okay, login throttling is our next little tidbit here. Login throttling is I attempt to log in, I typo my password, and I need to now, try again. How many times can I try again before NetBox is going to say, hold on there. You need to wait a little bit before you can try to log back in again. So we could say, yes, enable login throttling. Okay, maximum number of login attempts. All right, I got 3 attempts. If I can't get it within 3 attempts, I'm going to make you wait, 1 minute, 5 minutes, whatever it might be. We could say 5 attempts, 5 minutes. And what that is going to prevent is somebody sitting there with a browser, hitting your login, hitting a login, and just failing, trying to brute force their way in by cycling through a bunch of passwords. So this is one way to help restrict or limit that. All right, once you have those set the way that you want, you would hit save. One other feature here that would be good to point out while I'm here is this appropriate use banner. And you've probably seen these when you log into different systems. A lot of organizations will have this show when you log into your Windows account on your computer. And it's usually something that looks along the lines of like this. This system is the property of Stone Security. It is for authorized use only. By using this system, all users acknowledge notice of and agree to comply with Stone's acceptable use of information technology resource policy, unauthorized, yada, 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 yada. So you can put that in there, and where that shows up, save those changes, and I will log out here and I'll show you where that shows up. So now that shows up down here at the bottom of my login screen and kind of becomes like the legal voice of informing people that they could be prosecuted if they are trying to gain access to the system in an unauthorized manner. Okay, it's going to actually require me to change my password, which is going to be a little bit of annoying for this moment. Let's say yes, and current password. We'll say fill there, new password. Let's see, fill there, and save, and okay. It's nice with a password manager that functions well like that. So, but now my password has technically been changed. Anybody else's password who is longer or older than the requirement that we put in will also now have to change their password too. All right, so let's go back to where we were. So we'll go to configuration, site settings, network controller, and there's that website with everything that we had there. All right, so we're going to shift a little bit now to focus on more so people. And on the people side of it, one of actually really the best things that you can do is a use it or lose it policy for your credential. And what that means, for example, if we come to access control tab here, still on that network controller, configuration, site settings, network controller tab, also shows here across the top. We have an option for disable credentials after N days of non-use. So we could say, check the box, and we could come in and say, there's a little bit of logic here, right? If you have not used your credential to get into the space within 180 days, there's something about that. Like, why do you have that credential if you don't use it? So you could say, hey, if you have not used this within 180 days, then we want to disable that credential. And for people with individual credentials, it is just that credential. So you could have one credential that you're using. Maybe it's a fob on your keychain and another credential, a printed card in your wallet. And if you haven't used that printed card in 180 days, it would be disabled. You can also do this based on a specific credential profile. So you could say this profile, that non-use is 90 days. This other credential profile, this non-use is 180 days. So you can kind of categorize it a little bit if you wanted to. Maybe you have a group of people who travel a lot and they are not regularly in an office. So you could give them a little more time, but keep the rest of it a little bit tighter. There's a little more setup to the credential profiles, so we're not going to dig into that today, but we can definitely assist with that if that's something you want to look at. All right, this is another important one. Enable maximum number of active credentials per person. Why does Joe Schmo need 10 cards, 10 credentials, right? We don't want to even allow that. So we could say you are only limited to having 1 or 2 or 3 for however that fits best in your system. You can do that. Now, one common scenario would be, hey, you get a fob for a keychain, you get a card for your wallet, or maybe it's a lanyard to go around your neck. And maybe we also enable a mobile credential for you. So that would be 3 credentials that you could limit to. The challenge here is if you have a person, let's say they've got 2 credentials, pretty standard, nothing concerning there. If they lose one of them, then they come back and say, hey, I lost my credential. I need some help getting a new one set up. So you set up a new one, but they're not sure which one it was that they lost. And so you just add one to it. And then 6 months later, it's kind of the same story. Hey, I can't find my credential. It's at my house somewhere. I just forgot it. I just need something temporary for today. You give them a new credential, and over time, over the course of a year or 5 years, you can see how that would go from somebody having the default 2 credentials or 1 credential to having 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 credentials. Um, and this is the setting that is going to prevent that from happening. So you could say, hey, you are not allowed to have more than 3 credentials. Another one, you can enable temporary credential workflow. That is probably a discussion for another day. This is a really important one. By default, when you enter a credential into NetBox, it's going to have an open expiration date. There's not going to be a date in there. And so maybe that's great. We just want to grant access and we'll deal with removing them on the termination side. But if you want to enforce some kind of there is a end date to this no matter what. If you want to force that, hey, at this point we need to revisit your access levels, what you have access to, then you can set that credential expiration requirement. And now when you create a person, it's going to force you to put in an expiration date on the credential. You can set up expiration notifications as well. And just because there's some relevant settings here, one thing that is actually really an easy way to increase your badge security is to move from a credential only system to a credential and PIN. And so, because if you drop your credential and somebody picks it up or somebody steals it off your desk, while you're maybe in the restroom or whatever, they can use that and get around a facility without really any restrictions up until the point that they're caught or that badge is reported as lost or stolen and then it's deactivated. But requiring that second factor authentication of you have to present your badge and you have to type in a PIN, that is automatically going to add a much higher level of security to your system. For anybody still using procs, we would position that this is probably a requirement. This would be the easiest way to get your current credentials a little bit more secure. But just a little side note, also, if you're still on a low frequency procs format, please talk to us about getting that updated. Those are not secure. Those can easily be spoofed. And it would be kind of, it's kind of like this. If all of the doors on your locks, how at your home the bathroom doors or whatever are often, you just got to stick a toothpick in that to pop the lock once it's locked. That's kind of similar to the security level that a prox that a prox format gives. So all right, moving down my list. All right, so we talked about those options. Okay, so now we're going to jump over to, now I'm not going to save any of those changes because I don't want to do mass updates to the database right now. Let's jump over to some reports. So the first one we're going to look at, let's go administration and then reports and people. First one we're going to look at is this credential audit. This credential audit is kind of a really quick go-to report for finding out who has what credentials. Now, there's this filter at the top that is list only credentials not used within X number of days. So we can run this just in the partition that we're working with right now. We can tell it to span all partitions. We can include UDF fields if we want, and we can filter. So if we say UDF field home office, then I could say Las for Las Vegas, and this would only run that report on matches for that. We can also credential status. We can apply a credential status filter where, say, we're only looking at the active credentials, and we're going to ignore any of the other states. If we just run this as is, so what we get is a list of people, the person ID, the credential number, the credential status. We filtered it to active, so the only thing we should have is active. The credential format, the location, last used date and time, and the partition that it belongs to. All right, so let's run that again, though, and say, let's get rid of the active, and let's just look, well, let's leave active. Let's look at active credentials that have not been used within the last 180 days and hit go. So that dropped us down to 16 records. And expand out that list. So here we have the list. Here's the credential. It's currently active. This would be a great list to go through and say, all right, we're going to deactivate these credentials. Setting that value that we talked about, that last use, or sorry, that end days, disabled credentials after end days of non-use, would be a way to bulk modify this. So if you wanted to just have a very, very, very safe default value of, hey, after a year, disable it. But then you want to come and, kind of do maybe some bulk operations in kind of a roundabout way. You could say, I'm going to take those and set that to 90 days. And then all of a sudden I can cut this list down to 90 days and we would see a lot of these actives turn to disabled. All right, we can get rid of the active and just run it across everything. So this would show disabled, lost, everything showing not used. We can hit go again. That takes us up to 19 records. And then we have there. The nice thing about this report is that you can click on the person, jump straight to their credentials, and you can see here's the credential, no expiration date. It's currently set to active. I can go to recent activity and there's no activity. This badge has never been used in this system. So I can easily now go and say disable and save. I can hit the back button to get back to my report. I can run my report. I can drop in my 90 days again, hit go, and I can keep working my way through the list. The nice part is that link to say, get me to this person. I can make a quick change and then I can go back. You can also, I don't know if this is a bug or not. Let me see if I can replicate it. If I hit go, here's my report. If I jump to this person, all right, it still thinks I'm on the credential audit tab. And you'll even see like the crumb trail up here across the top is showing that as well. If I click on this credential audit again, it takes me back to the list. So I don't have to keep re-entering the information. Again, I don't know if that's by design or if it's a bug. If it's a bug, it's a happy bug. So I can easily just click on the person, modify what I need to, and then click back on the credential audit, and I'm right back at that same list. Okay. So now the downside of this credential audit is it doesn't give me a way to export this information. So generally speaking, if in NetBox, if you want to export a report of some kind, that's going to be what they call a custom report. So if we come to custom persons, because we're doing a report based on persons, then we have some reports that we can create. And these were all reports that I've played with over the last little bit. For example, we can run a report of just all the active badges. Let's edit it and see what it is. Active badges is what we named it. We can give it a card number, first name, last name, department. Maybe we don't want the department. Maybe instead we want the home office. So we can customize the columns that we see in the report. Okay, we can see the access level that they have. Maybe we sort it by last name. So we can do a sort order, change our sort order to last name ascending. Now, this is just going to run on everything. So we could say people filter credential status. So this is going to filter the report. Credential status is, and then you would type in active. These filters are logical and so what I can't do, unfortunately, is I can't say only show me people in this report who have a credential status of active or this other group of people. So any filters that I add to this report are just going to be further restricting and shortening the list of results that I get. Now, we could say credential status is, instead of just specifying one, we could say contains or is one of. And this is one of, we could say active, and I believe these are comma separated. So we could do active, disabled, and we could start putting in a list. And so as long as the credential status is one of these items, then we can kind of do multiple. Or there isn't the inverse of that, is not one of, but is one of, not in, starts with. So there's options there. Let's see. So we'll just do, just for simplicity, we'll just say is active, and we'll say save. Now I can run this report. And then we have options on how we digest this data. We can just open it up in an HTML format, a PDF, or a CSV. So if you want to gather information to then create a spreadsheet for bulk operations or data operations, then this is a great way to gather that data. You'll have to kind of manipulate it to get it into the format and structure necessary for a data operations. And that is definitely a conversation that our support team is best equipped to handle. But if we view that for now, just in an HTML report, here's the list of everybody with active badge, and it shows what the badge is. And it also is showing the access levels that they have. If there are multiple access levels, you would see them listed here all in this one column. All right. If you wanted to filter that, this is a nice little thing about the HTML view, is you could filter that and just say, only show me now a selection of this. So here's the group with just cage access, or everything except the cage. to answer the question in the chat, why would we say active and disabled in the same box? You might not necessarily show active and disabled in the same box. That was just by way of example. We could, for active badges, we would only want active. But if we were looking at inactive badges, so if we were to change this to inactive badges, then on our people filter, well, credential status, we have a bunch of different statuses of credentials. And so we could say disabled, expired. We would say, let's see, is one of disabled, expired, lost, whatever the categories are. You could put in multiples. Or if you want to just be really broad, you could say is not active. And so now on our credential status, is not active would give us everything that is outside of that active category, that active state. And if you need to verify what those are, let's see here, configuration, it is under access control and credential attributes. So here is the list of attributes. Now, there are some that are not modifiable, but you have your stolen, your returned, lost, and you can add additional as well, suspended. Some of these you can turn on and off. So if you don't want those, you can disable them completely. And so on. All right, jumping back to where we were. So we are under reports, people, custom person. Okay, so you might say something like, okay, maybe I need to grab a series of reports and then I aggregate these into an Excel sheet. So for example, on this credential cleanup 1, we'll go to edit. We can give it an additional name, so cards not active. And you can see first name, last name, home office, card number, credential status. Those are the columns we're grabbing. How are we filtering that? Credential status is not active, and we're not doing any other sort of restrictions. We are sorting it by last name, first name. You can schedule these as well. All right, so let's hit save, and we can run that report. So this is telling us all the cards that are not active in the system. And we have some disabled, some expired, and there's the list. Now because these are disabled, these aren't people that can have access into anything. Maybe they can still log into the software if they still have that access enabled. But they can't get into my doors because their credential has been disabled. The thing here is that they still exist as a user in my system. Now, if you have 1,000, 5,000, maybe that's not an issue. But if maybe you have 20,000 or 50,000 card holders, maybe we start to see some slowness start to introduce into our system there. So these might be people that, hey, if it's been long enough, maybe instead of just being disabled, maybe we want to look at deleting them. And a little caveat on that, this is really good to look at. So if we go to people search, okay, let me find one. We'll do John Doe. So if I have John Doe, if I want to delete him, we'll click delete. There's two options here. There's a delete person and a purge person. When we delete a person, it is going to revoke all their access rights. The record is kept for reporting purposes. Are you sure you want to delete this person? So deleting somebody means they're still there. Their access is taken away, but you'll still see a name associated with the badge. and you'll still see that badge, that card show up as a registered credential. So if I just delete them, they're deleted. They're still here. They still have, well, this guy doesn't have any credentials, but if I come up, if these, you can see how the font here is changed to bold. That indicates that there is an expiration date on that person, and so that has been passed, as well as we deleted them. So if I come here to my display, let's see, nope, it's under the refined search results. So we can include deleted records, expired records. So I can turn off expired people. And now John Doe has expired from the list. If I turn expired back on, John Doe's still gone from the list. If I include deleted records, John Doe pops back up in the list. Purging is going to remove that person and all associations between that person and a card or a credential from the system. Anybody that is deleted, there is a setting that will automatically purge deleted people after they are X number of days old. That's under configuration. And it's, let's see, I believe it's under controller. Let me see really quick if I can find where that was. Enable person purge. So we can allow the purging option. Automatically purge a person record 90 days after deletion, and that's currently enabled. So anybody that I delete, I can just leave them in that delete state, and then in 90 days, once we get, or if your retention policy is, hey, I need to have all of my access logs for 180 days, then you would say 180 days, and then after that, we really don't care about keeping that person and their record of information from there. So you can delete that. So that's a good thing to have in place to kind of help NetBox automatically in the background manage the size of your database and keep it nice and clean and working quick and fast for you. One thing I will say is, and we'll cover this shortly, is NetBox is actually really good at maintaining its database. On a lot of other systems, it's much more of a manual process that you have to actually do. NetBox takes care of a lot of that behind the scenes. All right, we were looking at reports. So people, custom person. Okay. So let's say you wanted to get a list of who is in what access level. That's a very common question. Well, there's a couple ways we can go about that. One, we can go to report, we can go to administration, reports, people. There is an access level report here. Now, this is very simplistic. This is, what are my access levels? Okay, it'll tell you the name of the access level. It'll tell you the reader or reader groups that are in that access level, and it will tell you if it's what the associated threat level group is there as well. So this is a very just quick, easy reference on what are my access levels and some high-level details about them. But we want to dig deeper than that because this doesn't tell us anything about people and who. You have the similar type of thing with the access level groups. So here's my access level group, and this is the access levels that are inside that group and the partition that it belongs to. Okay, slightly still not, entirely what we're looking for, but still a step in the right direction. We could jump up to configuration reports, and we could see now a reader groups. So here's that all doors. Okay, this is what's part of that reader group. So we can start to now piece information together in a bread trail. Like, okay, if I print this and print the other one, I can reference things. Okay, still not quite exactly what we want, but there is another one. And if we go to portal access, So this is a different report that's going to give us a lot more detailed information. So we can say any location. We could narrow it down to a particular door. So if I wanted to see who has access to the lab door, we can do that. Or elevator, we could say who has access to the elevator. Um, and then where we can, filter by user defined fields again. Uh, Include deleted people, yes or no, and we'll hit go. So this is who has access to the lab door. There's a record of 27 people. Okay. Or the office admin door. Let's run it against the lab door and see how that changes. 27 still shows 27 records. We can do all or any and hit go. And now we've got a different list. So, but here is what we have. We have the name of the user. Okay. So first name, last name. And then off to the right, we have the access level and portal or access level / elevator. So all doors except cage, and it tells us this particular doors that they have access to from that. So we have the access level, and then we have the portal. So this is a much quicker way of seeing who has access to what. All right. So if you had an IDF or an IT closet door, you can come and specify that one in the list. We'll say storage room and hit go. And there's only a list of 27 people who have access to the storage room door. And it tells you again, the access level that gives them that. And then, so all doors always, and then the door, all doors except cage, and then the door. So this is really helpful in trying to figure out, do my users have the right level of access, or do I need to modify my access levels? Do I need to restructure them to improve the restrictions, I guess you could say, in a way? One thing about access levels, though, is you really don't need a million different access levels because they're additive. So you can build, you don't need necessarily like an access level that is um, these, all my exterior doors and these 5 interior doors and this other door in the warehouse, right? Because you can split that up to be exterior doors, the group of 5 doors inside, and whatever else. And every time you add an access level to somebody's access, let me jump there. So we'll go back to person search and we'll pick a student access levels. So right now this person only has 1 access level. There are some that you will always have. There will always, you should always have like an all doors always. But I don't need a million access levels with overlapping doors. If you approach it more on the collection of doors aspect of it, and then we're going to start stacking those on top of each other. Hopefully that makes sense. We'll go over that, I think, in more detail again when we cover access levels again. All right. So, but that portal access report that we were looking at is handy to just give us that quick list. Okay. Once we have that information, we can either kind of go through the system manually, making those adjustments, taking people out, expiring credentials if we need to, or you can do a bulk data operations where you drop everything into an Excel format and then you upload that Excel format. You upload that. I think it's a CSV file at that point, but you upload that CSV file into NetBox, and then it will process that CSV file, making those changes that are noted there, adding, removing, modifying access levels or whatever. At its simplest form, it's still pretty complex, but when we start talking about removing specific access levels, adding people, removing people, it can get quite complex. So if that's not something that you're familiar with, that process, my recommendation is schedule a one-on-one session with somebody from our support and engineering team, and they can walk you through what that looks like, how it functions, and um, kind of some of the things to be watchful and mindful of, because we're dealing with kind of the data structure at its raw level, how the database sees it. We want to make sure that it's going to match up and line up, that there's not weird characters going to cause issues or extra spaces causing issues. And then the columns need to be in the right order and a bunch of other stuff. Okay. This next section we're going to talk about is going to cover kind of more the preventative maintenance of your system and recovering from any kind of a catastrophic failure. So we're going to collapse a couple of these sections so we can reset. All right, we're going to be now in the configuration section. And we're going to go back to where do we want to start? Let's start in system maintenance and then under backups. Okay. So I have a document here that NetBox has made that's actually pretty informative on this. And then we'll talk. So I'll highlight some points here, and then we'll talk through how that actually relates in real life. Everything in your NetBox is contained within a database that is connected to NetBox. Now, that database is backed up regularly on a daily basis at 12:15 a.m. at 0:15 hours. On Sunday, it is a full backup, so you get a complete and entire snapshot of the system. On Monday through Saturday, it's a differential backup. So on Monday, it's only going to back up the changes that happened or the new information that happened since the Sunday backup. On Tuesday, it's only going to get the changes and new information that happened since the Monday backup, and so on. So the differential backups are only going to be what changed since the last differential backup, since the last full backup. These backups are automatically written and saved locally to the S2 NetBox controller. They can also be saved to a NAS or to an FTP server if you have one available and have that configured in your NetBox. So we'll look at where those are set up. Couple things here. So this is what is being backed up. Security database with all configuration information. So if you have a recent backup and your whole controller, everything tanks and dies, as long as you have access to that backup, you can restore it to a new controller, whether that's a rebuilt VM or a new physical controller that's new out of the box, doesn't have anything, any of your site information. You can restore that backup to that new controller, and you will be back up and running. Now, there's a caveat there with it had to be accessible. So if we can't get to your old controller to get the backups, those backups should reside somewhere else as well. So if we can't get to it, then we don't have that information available to get the backup from. Photos and badge designs are backed up. Floor plans are backed up. User-created sound files are backed up, and recent system activity and log data is backed up as well. Okay. Now, archives. Let's talk about archives. So you have that database backup happening, but there's also an archive component. And what this is it's trying to maintain the overall size of the active live database. And so when that backup happens, every Sunday after a full backup, the system is going to check the number of activity log records. If this number exceeds 150,000, so if there are more than 150,000 activity log records, then all records in excess of 100,000, so after this is run, your main active database should only have 100,000 active records. Everything in excess of that is going to be zipped off into an archive file and separated out from the active NetBox database. NetBox will store the most 20 recent archive files locally. And you can store up to 100 of them on the most recent, 100 of the most recent archives on the NAS or FTP server. Now, the archive file contains data that is still accessible to the controller. So just because it's in an archive doesn't mean it's not available and accessible. It is still accessible. The S2 controller, or the NetBox controller, will retrieve appropriate data from the archive files automatically. All right. There's a lot of information there. Let's kind of, we'll dig through it. So I'm going to sort this by last modified date and time. So you can see that today is Friday the 28th. We had a nightly differential backup. Yesterday, we had a nightly differential. And if we keep going through all the way down, we will get to Sunday night, the 23rd. And just to confirm, Sunday was, yep, indeed the 23rd. So actually, this was Sunday morning. Sunday morning at 12:15 a.m., we had a full backup. When these happen, how often these happen is unfortunately not something that we can configure within NetBox. They are hard set, full backups on Sunday morning and nightly backups the rest of every other morning. And they all happen at that 00:15, which is 12:15 a.m. time. You can download these backups. And so we can say get, and it's going to now download this last full backup. We can't download the differential backups, but we can download the full backups. You can also, anytime you need, do a manual backup. So if we were going to be doing something like a big bulk change, or before we do a software update, we might want to come and do a full backup before major bulk operations. Because if something goes wrong, maybe I want a very fast way to revert those changes if things don't go as planned. So we can create that full backup, and we'll give it here a minute. Could take a minute or two, and we'll see that new backup show up. There you go. So with our comment, full backup before major bulk operations is the comment. We can download it as well. So if we need to download that, move it over to another controller. That's the easiest way to do that. That's the current full snapshot of everything that the system has to offer. Now, if I do move that over, though, my length of retention in logs is not completely in that backup because there's limitations. So that's where those archives come in. And for example, if we go to restore a system, if you have a system backup file to upload, click here. So you can upload the backup from another system, as well as, I believe, the archives. So if you want to pull those archives out, so you have, your 2, 3, 4 years of whatever, you can grab those out too, and then bring them. On the restore side of this, it's pretty straightforward. So here's our list of backups. There's the full one we just did, differential, so on, down to the full backup. You'll notice as we get further out, sort these this way. So date and time. These are not sorting how I would expect. Got January 2025. February. And then we jump to 2024 at the top. We start by last change. We've got that one we just did. That sort order seems to be better. Yeah, that does look better. Anyway, so you can grab the backup that you want and you can restore. Now, obviously, I don't want to roll back to anything, but you can hit restore, follow any additional prompts that it's going to give you, and get back to that save point that you made. Okay, so let's go back to the backups though. So this system is relatively small. It's only a couple doors and a handful of card holders. On a larger system though, you would have the archives. I can pull up this other one and I can archives there. So configuration, system maintenance, backup. So here you'll see some archives. Let's fix that sort. So archives. So again, so an archive is once we get over 150,000 transactions, then we'll take anything over. So we have a threshold criteria to meet first, 150,000. Once we meet that threshold, then we're going to scale it back a little bit, and anything over 100,000 we're going to move into that archive. And so you'll see that it's just this archive.zip. We can download them. So if we need to move them to a new system, we can. But this is what gives us the length of our retention over a system in the file structure, category at least. All right. Let's look at, while we're talking about backups, let me come back over here. And let's talk about moving backups to something off the box. So we could do an FTP backup. We can enable that. We would need to provide FTP server address and credentials, and then the directory that we're going to put that into. And then it is strongly recommended to use secure FTP instead of just regular traditional FTP. I don't have an FTP server set up to mock this up with today, but it's pretty straightforward. You put the information in, and then you will start to push backups there. Network storage, same thing. So if you wanted to connect it to a NAS, then we would say we could create a new one, fill in that information. What's using it is, backups. Are we saving reports off to it? But in this context, it's backups. So here's my server name, IP address, shared directory, share name, shared directory, authentication, what kind of authentication. And now we can offload our backups to that machine. This protects us against the case where we have backups, they're happening, but our controller just full on dies. Maybe it's power surge, maybe it's, somebody stole it, maybe somebody took a hammer to it, or maybe something just got really corrupted on it. This gives us that offsite backup that we can then pull in to rebuild the system. So these are really critical. Okay. Let's see, restoring from a backup. We looked at that. It's pretty straightforward. We just go to restore, select the one that we want and hit restore, follow the rest of the prompts. Running system health reports. So there is a section here on system health and maintenance that kind of gives us a little bit of information here. You'll notice that, yes, my susp is expired. Tells us, who our contact information is for that system. We can export our system information if we needed to send that over to either for a license renewal or to support for some reason. But down here at the bottom, so we have our mine is running on a VM. We can have our disk status here. So all my disks are working normally. We can see detailed disk information. Backups are all most recent backup successfully completed. So no failures in backup, no failures in archive, and disk usage is showing 18%. So we've got plenty of room. There's other options in here. So like disk management. It'll show you this. A lot of this is just the tiers that the software uses, where the database lies. and then the different capacities and whether it's, the percentage used there. Disk monitoring is more for like if you have spinning disks or something attached to it, then you'll see those statuses there. Storage, again, kind of just more storage. So like here's my system drives. What I haven't found great information on is what these different, so like here's a dev SDA1 and a dev SDA3. Video storage is down here on this dev SDA3, but my capacities are all fairly low. This one, my guess is like this is maybe where the actual OS is installed, that partition where the application is running. And so we're not worried about that 77%. It's 77% on pretty much every system I've ever seen, but this 18% is the rest of our data storage component. To answer the question, where can we find this document? That's this PDF one here. I got this from our support team. I'm not sure where they got it from exactly. I believe this is something that we can provide externally. It may be a little dated because it's still referencing like the S2 name instead of LenelS2, but the principles are still the same in it. I'll have to see if I can find either an updated version, and maybe we can link it in the comments somewhere on YouTube, or we'll find some way, maybe we can email it out. But I think this probably just came from their support website a couple of years ago when they were still S2 security instead of LenelS2. But it was helpful in describing when the backups happen and then when the archives start to appear. All right. Next thing. So part of checking the health of your system is being aware of what components or things are online or offline. And we can get a good overview of that under not network resources, but under site settings. If you have, well, we'll look at it here. So node status. This is going to tell you what nodes are online, what nodes are offline. And this is NetBox nodes or Mercury hardware. Both will show up in this list. I have one. It tells us it's part of the master partition, tells us what it is. It's a Mercury LP1502, and it is currently connected. I can click on the link here, and that's going to take me to this section. From here, I can see that its current status is normal. I can verify that the time zone is correct. It is currently running firmware 1.31.0. And if we jump over to the firmware tab here, we'll see that the release supported firmware is 1.31.0 and the recommended is 2.0.2. So this is really straightforward. We're going to go to update and release supported firmware. That's the 131, 131. That's the one I'm already running. The recommended firmware is 2.0.2. I can hit OK and OK. It will cause panels to reset. Operations will be impacted basically while this is happening, just to be aware. And are you sure you want to proceed? And then I could say, yes, I don't want to do this live because I want to make sure that systems stay up and running for the rest of the demo. But that's a great thing to do later in the day, maybe after hours on a weekend, where that little bit of outage isn't going to impact people coming and going while the firmware on the controllers is being updated. But why do we do that? Why do we update firmware? Well, there's several reasons. One, there's a compatibility aspect to it. We want our hardware's feature sets to match the software's feature sets. And so that is oftentimes managed through firmware. Another part of it is security. We want to make sure that our hardware has all the appropriate security patches so that we don't have critical vulnerabilities in our hardware that are going to allow somebody to come and attack our system by first attacking the hardware endpoint, which then would give them an in to the rest of the system potentially. So firmware updates are important. Along those lines, updating the firmware is one part of the equation. Updating the system is another part of the equation. That is under again, system maintenance. And if I come down to update software, we have the mechanism now to update the software. Now, as long as your SUSP is current, meaning not expired, you have access to any updates that NetBox releases while your SUSP is current. When it is expired, like it's showing here, I can't actually do updates. So I'm stuck and locked wherever I was when that happened. But what you do is you work with our support team to get the appropriate update files. You upload the files, the system validates it. It will create a backup in the process, and then it will do that last and final step, which is to update the software components and then reboot, and then you're back up and now running on that latest version. A couple months ago, I did the update from, let's see, we're on 6.0 right now. I think I was on 5.6.2 before. And that whole update process, it was really straightforward. I think it took 5 minutes total, with maybe only a minute of that, or 2 minutes of that being an actual outage where the system or software wasn't functional. So it's pretty quick. It's pretty straightforward. Again, having that backup is important though, because if something doesn't go right, we need that ability to roll back to what we at least had as a stable version. Let's look at now how long we keep kind of some of our information for. Now, NetBox doesn't give us necessarily granular controls across all the different parts to say, I want to keep information for X number of days. There are some areas where we see a little bit. So we'll look at those. That is under, so configuration, site settings, network controller, and then under the events and activity. So the option here is retain access activity only a number of days. So if you want to, now the storage size determines the maximum that you can have, the maximum potential. And NetBox's default posture is we're going to keep it as long as we can. Okay. If you want to say some policy or some governance says, I don't want any of my access activity beyond 100 days or beyond 1 year, you would put that here. 0 is going to be the unlimited number, but putting in another value is going to give us that higher threshold. Or it'll give us that mandated, this is what it is threshold. Okay. Similarly, on the data integration, we have some data operations for 30 days. We had another one I thought too. Where was it? Maybe not. Maybe it's just, I think it's probably just mainly this guy here. Remember that 150,000 and the 100,000 values that we saw in the documentation? We can actually modify that a little bit. I would be very careful in doing this because there are limitations in what the active database can have, but you can adjust this. I don't know what the thresholds or parameters are for, what would be too much or what would be too low, but Right now, there's that default 100,000. So once we hit that 150,000 threshold, then we'll cut it back to 100,000 in the and then every in the active database, anything over that we archive off. You can play with those numbers a little bit here if wanted, but before I do that, I would vet that that situation with our support team just to double check. Okay, I think we are coming up on the end of what I had planned to cover. Let me keep looking through my list here and see if I've missed anything. Kind of jumped around a little bit. And if you have questions, now would be a great time to drop them into the Q&A section. Or if for some reason that Q&A section doesn't show up, you can drop them into the chat. Okay, that is a great question, actually. So the question is, are any email notifications sent out for newly available NetBox software updates or somewhere we can subscribe to check? Yes, there are. The best way is to actually subscribe to Stone Security's newsletter, because we include in that newsletter, anytime NetBox releases an update, we include that information there. You can see it on the NetBox webpage, the LenelS2 webpage. It tends to be kind of hidden and hard to find, and I know that as they have been modifying and updating web pages, it's kind of moved around a little bit, and so it's harder to find there. But what I would do is reach out to actually you can just even go to our website, and there is a section there to subscribe to our newsletter. Our newsletter is includes the current releases of all softwares, and if we are notified of an update to a software component, we include that information in our newsletter. Patrick is really amazing at that. So that's where I would do that. And then you get the added benefit of you get information on all the other Stone happenings. Now, you say newsletter, and people often start to tune out on, because we're all tired of the spam. We're pretty good at not over spamming you with emails and news and unrelevant things. We really try to keep it just the best stuff, stuff that is relevant to you, upcoming trainings, whatever it might be, and then highlights of new tech or new products or new changes to software. Another thing we do kind of along those lines is when we do get those releases, once we have deployed them and gotten a chance to play with them a little bit, we will often do a video review. So there's a couple on our website already where we've done that. Sorry, not our website. There's a couple on our YouTube channel where we've already done that, where we'll walk you through what the changes are, and show you. And so that's a great reference there as well. So check out the YouTube channel for that. We've done those with security and sandwiches in the past. We want to do them kind of as their own little main highlight separate video in the future. But that'll be a place to keep an eye out for updates and what changed in those updates. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I think that covers the points that I wanted to articulate. If there was anything that didn't quite make sense or was unclear or looks differently in your system, for example, if you're still running the older software versions pre 6.0, maybe some of the menu structures or pages look a little different. If you need help finding those settings or making those changes, again, reach out to us. We're happy to help. We have support agreements available if you kind of want that unlimited access to our support team, I guess you could say. But yeah, that's what I've got to cover. I appreciate everybody joining today. We hope it was informative and useful, and keep an eye out in your email box for the lunch credits to come to you here shortly. And thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.